Today I want to talk to you about the pensions time bomb. And I'm sure you've heard other people talking about this, warning us that this time bomb is going to go off in the future. But unfortunately, I think the truth is it's already gone off. When state pensions were introduced in Ireland, the life expectancy of Irish people was far lower than it is today. Just to give you an example, 75 years ago, the average Irish person lived to 65 years of age. In 2025, that average has risen to 81 years of age. So if you think about when the actuaries were calculating the cost of pensions, they could assume that an awful lot of people wouldn't live long enough to collect them. And then they could further assume that even those who did live long enough to collect them wouldn't live too much longer after they collected them. So the cost of these pensions down the line is going to be far greater than the original actuaries and accountants would have thought it was. What else has happened over the same period of time? Well, or similar periods of time. Over the last 10 years, for example, the number of over 65s has increased by 40%. Today, there are 4 people at work for every 1 person retired. But based on the future estimates of population, by 2050 there'll be 2 people at work for every 1 person retired. Our birth rates have dropped by 26% since 2010, which means there aren't enough people being born to replace the people leaving the workplace at 65 years of age. While many Irish workers are solely dependent on the state pension, we're told that only 1 in 3 Irish workers have no pension at all. So a third of Irish workers in that example are solely dependent on the state pension, which at its maximum is just over €15,000. We're also told about the average income in Ireland. And you relate the maximum pension to that average income, and pensions are 34% of the average. So if you're average, where are you going to find the savings? How are you going to drop to 34% of your income? Now, if you're not average, and mostly our viewers and subscribers are the high income earners, if you're on 100,000 a year, the state pension is going to give you 15% of your income. If you're on 200,000 a year, it's going to give you 7.5% of your income. So not only am I suggesting that these numbers tell us that the promises made by the state may not be sustainable in the new Ireland and the growing Ireland that we are in today, but I'm also suggesting to you, as Ireland's high income earners, that even if the state pension can survive these changes, it is a tiny percentage of your actual working income. This is not the first time I've tried to bring to the public's attention or the political class's attention the problems that are inherent in the state pension system here in Ireland. 13 years ago, I met the then Minister for Pensions, and I told that lady at the time about the average life expectancy figures when pensions were first introduced and how they had risen, as I've demonstrated already, since then. The lady didn't seem to care. Not only did the lady didn't seem to care, but coincidentally, the day before I met this lady, I had been at a parent-teacher meeting for my 8-year-old daughter at the time. And I realized that yesterday in the timeline, I'd been talking to a primary school teacher. And today, although this person had a ministerial title, I was talking to a primary school teacher. Somebody who didn't really know the subject matter, somebody who didn't really care about the subject matter because of the way the political system works. Ministers are ministers for a relatively short period of time. They see their job as predominantly getting re-elected not as solving long-term financial issues this country may be facing. And let me put the financial issues into some perspective for you. We're told today that Ireland Inc. has a national debt of €218 billion. Now, that's a substantial debt, and per capita it's a substantial amount for all of us. But what we're not told is that if we capitalise the promises of the state in pension terms to the civil servants and to the public in general, you could add 770 billion to that debt. So while our national debt is high relative to the money we owe foreign countries and foreign individuals, and Irish individuals, of course, the national debt in reality is significantly higher. It's almost 4 times what's reported when you take only the national debt into account. You can add 770 billion to that when you add the promises made on pensions. What does this mean? In real terms, in day-to-day numbers, CSO and other institutions tell us that today pensions cost about €9 billion a year, and by 2030 will cost €17 billion a year. Where's all this money going to come from? So let me try and answer that question, because there are only really 3 sources of all this extra money. Either we have to put more people at work than our predictions suggest, or we have to tax the people who are already at work more heavily, or we have to extend the retirement age. Now let's take the last one there. Many of you will have noticed that France tried to extend the retirement age some time ago, and riots broke out and Paris was afire. While I understand people's frustration with that, you can't deny the science. The science tells us that 75 years ago, the average Irish person lived to 65, and today the average Irish person lives to 81. And by the way, that's only going to increase. In January this year, I read an article that talked about Holles Street, the National Maternity Hospital, and suggested that there was likely a baby born in the National Maternity Hospital in January 2025 who will live to 127 years of age. Now, if that baby works the 40 years, retires at 65, and lives to 127, they'll be retired 62 years. That's 22 years longer than they worked. It doesn't work. The mathematics doesn't work. So I know what I would prefer, of course. I would prefer to see more people at work, and I imagine you would too. Certainly prefer it to paying more taxes, because we're already paying a heap of taxes in this country anyway, aren't we? And I would prefer that some science comes in to estimate retirement ages, because not only is 65, as proven by the statistics, way younger than the potential life expectancy of the Irish people, but most Irish people at 65 are well capable of working at 65, well capable of working perhaps to 75. Now, I don't want to get the naysayers down with that sort of thing, but science is science and it cannot be denied. What is the actual solutions coming to be? Well, we've got this thing called auto-enrolment coming, don't we? While they call it auto-enrolment is a new tax. It's basically the state saying you must pay in to a particular type of pension scheme and your employer must match it. So you and your employer are paying more out of your income than you were yesterday. And they don't call it a tax, but it is a tax. The problem with auto-enrolment is that the state contribution to auto-enrolment is bigger for those who are at the 20% basic tax rate, but is smaller for our audience, the high earners in Ireland. Because today, you high earners, if you make a contribution to your pension scheme, be that an existing one or a new one, you get a 40% tax break on that contribution. Auto-enrolment gives a 33% addition. So the 20% taxpayers get a good deal from auto-enrolment, but the high earners do not. And this shouldn't surprise us, because let's face it, a lot of these government schemes are giving preferential treatment to those who have less money than to those who have more. Let me interrupt this podcast for a moment. Do you know how to create wealth? Do you know how to limit your taxation? Do you know how to protect that wealth when you do create it? Well, if the answer is no, our masterclass is for you. Over 12 modules and 36 videos, I will personally teach you how to create wealth, how to minimize your taxations, how to protect that wealth when you create it. Check out the link below, and now back to the podcast. I've mentioned other things before, haven't I? Fair deal is another example. Fair deal is fair if you have little or no money. Well, it's not very fair if you have some. So auto-enrolment is coming, but for those of you at the higher end of the tax bracket, auto-enrolment is not as lucrative as the current system. A private retirement scheme, be that a personal retirement scheme, be it a PRSA, be it a company-sponsored pension scheme if you're a company owner. Each one of those for the high earners offers a 40% tax break on personal contributions versus a 33% addition on auto-enrolment. For company owners, not only is there the personal tax break potential, but there's greater tax breaks potentials because your company can pay far more than the normal individual allowances. So you'd think I was selling pensions, wouldn't you? Because what I'm telling you, if you're a high-end earner, you need to be utilizing your retirement scheme. You need to be using it to your best possible advantage. You need to use it because if you're on 100 grand a year or more, the state pension's only 15% of your income anyway. You need to use it because it offers a 40% tax break as opposed to a 33% tax addition in auto-enrolment. You need to use it because as you work for 40 years, you not only have to earn the income you need to fill the fridge and pay for the car and go on the odd holiday, but you have to earn the money too that's going to keep the older you. And the longer it goes on, the older you lives longer and longer and longer. Don't depend on the state pension. At some stage, even though it's politically incorrect, some government of this country will have to tackle the fact that the arithmetic doesn't work. Whether that's in increased taxes, whether that's in extensions to the old age pension age, it has to happen because we don't have the money. Now, maybe we'll strike oil on the Western Seaboard. Maybe we'll become one of the richest countries in the world. Maybe we'll find diamonds in the hills in Wicklow. But beyond those maybes, the figures don't stack up. You cannot depend on the Irish state. You cannot depend on the promises it's making. What you can depend on is yourself. What you can depend on is the excellent tax breaks that are available around private retirement schemes. And what you can depend on is that you can use those today to start to build the wealth that future you will need to fill the fridge and pay for the car and go on the odd holiday. It only remains for me to, as usual, thank you if you're a subscriber. Thank you if you're not a subscriber, but you're about to subscribe. And don't forget that subscribers is what makes us work, what makes us tick, what allows us the time to put this type of information together for you and deliver it in the way that you can consume it whenever you want.